Let's talk about sort of what separates you, because ultimately this is a job interview, right? And people got to pick who is the best person for this job. You have a different biography than most of the other people that are running. Why are you the most qualified person to lead LA when a lot of the people you're running against have a lot more experience in government service?
Well, let me first talk about them sort of generally for a minute, then I'm going to talk about me, which is an important question that you've asked. They've had a lot of opportunity. They've had decades of public service to get something done, and they haven't. They failed. And I just find it interesting that you've got a group of people that are tasked with making the city safe and livable, and they've had a decade to get it done. They failed, but they want a raise and a job promotion. That wouldn't happen anywhere else, right? And so if you think they've done a good job, I'm not your candidate. If you want more of the same, I'm not your candidate. Let me tell you about Rick Caruso. I've worked hard. I'm from humble beginnings. I love life. I love giving back, and I've got a track record of moving into a situation where there's a serious problem or a crisis and fixing it. I came into LAPD. It was under a federal consent decree run by a federal judge. Crime was spiking. I reformed LAPD, hired Bill Bratton. We dropped crime by 30%. That was a crisis situation. Asked to step up at USC. We turned USC around with a lot of help from leadership, but that's a very different enterprise today than it was 4 years ago when I took over as chair. And I have this passion about Los Angeles, and we're in a crisis. That's what it is. Let's say what it is. And I've got a track record of being able to manage through a crisis, lead. I'll hold myself accountable. I'll make tough decisions. And I'm not looking for another job. I want to be mayor. I want to get a job done and go home. I'm not looking at making decisions through a political lens to get reelected like all of my other candidates who are running are doing.
And when you say USC, you were chairman of the board of trustees at USC. Fight on.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, because we know the two biggest issues right now, you lead with them in your campaign ad, crime and homelessness. Let's start with crime. Some of your critics point to the fact that you supported George Gascon for district attorney. Do you regret that, and do you now support his recall?
So I knew George when I was the president of the police commission, and he was a deputy chief, and he wanted to be chief. I didn't make him chief. He wasn't ready for it at the time, and I hired Bill Bratton. Now, he left and became the chief at Mesa, Arizona, then went up to San Francisco. I knew a very different George. Now, what happened to George on his journey from Mesa to San Francisco that changed the way he thought about fighting crime is very different than where he was. So early in his campaign, I did support him. He was a friend. I knew him from our time together at LAPD. Once his campaign started rolling out and I was hearing about what his plans were, I quickly pivoted and I gave to Jackie Lacey, and I gave her a significant amount of money to support her. So I regret what George has done, and I think George either needs to stand up and say, the policies that I've put into place are harming our communities and I'm going to change them, or he should step down, and if he doesn't step down, he should be recalled because he is harming our communities. And I stand with Charlie Beck, and I stand with Bill Bratton that said the same thing. This was a different George than we all knew when we worked at LAPD together. I don't know what's happened. But clearly he's got to change, or he's got to go.
The other big issue is homelessness.
Yep.
Number one thing you're going to do that's going to be different than the people that have been in there so far?
Day one, declare a state of emergency, move the authority into the mayor's office. I'll be accountable to fix it. I'm going to build the smartest team in the country to go fix the problem. We're going to go build 30,000 temporary beds. We've got excess land throughout the city that's declared surplus land. We're going to give people an option to move into a clean, safe place in a very humane way, give them the right services that they need, mental health, physical health, but you don't get a choice to stay on the street anymore. The minute we have a bed for you, you move into the bed, or otherwise there's a consequence to being on the street. You have to draw a bright line that we've got communities all around Los Angeles, whatever demographics, that are severely impacted by encampments. You can't tolerate it anymore.
When you say there's a consequence, what does that mean? You're arrested?
You probably are arrested. If we give you a bed and we give you the services and we clean you and we feed you and we support you, and I think there should be retraining programs to get people back on their feet that can get back on their feet, why then should we allow people to live on the street? And where do you draw that line? You can't. And that's what's happened with this problem. Everybody has been so politically correct in their mind, whatever that means, to deal with it. The problem has just gotten larger.
Let's talk about your place in this race. You live a very comfortable lifestyle after working really hard and being very successful in business. That is the American dream, right?
Right.
But the average American doesn't live your lifestyle. The average Los Angeleno doesn't live your lifestyle. How do you relate to somebody who's struggling to pay the bills?
Well, let me tell you, again, I grew up with immigrant parents from Italy that lived in Boyle Heights, and my grandfather was a gardener, and I remember riding in his truck, and I remember a family that lived from paycheck to paycheck. There was always a meal on the table, always worked hard, but paycheck to paycheck. Great pride being an American and great belief in this city. And that's the spirit I do this with. But I have also spent the last 30 years working in East LA and working in Watts, supporting the underserved, education and healthcare. The track record and the understanding and the families that I know down there, that my children have worked with, that we become personal friends with, I understand it. I've got people who lease space for me that are small businesses that struggled during the pandemic. We waived all the rent. We wrote everything off. We supported them financially. Because I started as a small business. I started with no business, and I built it. So I do understand it. So this notion that I don't connect, I'm probably more connected because of our work in the inner city than most people. And I want to expand helping the great people of the city, especially those that really need help, by being mayor. That would be a great gift to me. I'd be honored to do that.